You are standing in front of your closet right now in your head, deciding what to wear today. A shirt, maybe a jacket, something for the weather. It feels like the most mundane decision a person can make. But somewhere behind that choice is a mystery that took scientists decades to even ask the right question about. Because humans are the only animal on Earth that gets dressed. And for most of human history, nobody knows exactly why that started. You have probably heard the simple answer: cold. Ancient humans got cold, so they wrapped themselves in fur. Case closed. But the real answer is far stranger and far more recent than you think, and it says something uncomfortable about how fragile your body actually is. Here is the first problem with the simple answer. Humans did not evolve in the cold. Your species took shape in the heat of Africa, under direct sun on open grassland. Your body is, in almost every sense, a heat-dumping machine. You sweat through millions of glands. You lost most of your body hair specifically so that sweat could evaporate off bare skin and cool you down. Evolution spent an enormous amount of energy making you good at surviving heat. So why would that same body suddenly need fur? The answer starts not with fabric, but with lice. In 2003, a geneticist named Mark Stoneking, working with colleague Ralph Kittler, looked at something almost nobody had thought to study. Human lice come in different types. Head lice live in your hair. Body lice live in clothing, clinging to fabric instead of skin. And crucially, body lice cannot survive without clothes. They need the fibers to nest in. That meant something remarkable. If you could figure out when body lice genetically split off from head lice, evolving into a separate species adapted to fabric, you could estimate with real scientific precision when humans started wearing clothes. The number that came back stunned researchers. Somewhere around 170,000 years ago, give or take. Not millions of years. Not even close to when modern humans first appeared. Clothing showed up relatively recently in the story of your species, and it showed up for a very specific reason. What was happening 170,000 years ago? Ice. A massive glacial period was gripping the planet. Africa itself was getting colder and drier, and your ancestors, this heat-dumping, sun-adapted, nearly hairless animal, was suddenly facing a climate its own body had never been built for. This is where the story gets interesting because clothing was not simply a convenience. It was a workaround for a design flaw. Your body had traded fur for sweat glands, betting everything on a hot climate. When that climate turned cold, the bet stopped paying off. Humans needed an external solution because their internal one no longer matched the environment. An anthropologist named Gilligan has spent years studying exactly this shift, and his research reframes clothing entirely. Gilligan argues that clothing was not decoration first, and it was not modesty first. It was thermal technology, full stop, and one of the very first pieces of technology your species ever depended on to survive. Think about what that means. The device on your body right now, the shirt, the sweater, whatever you happen to be wearing, is a direct descendant of one of the oldest inventions humans ever made. Older than the wheel, older than agriculture, older than almost anything you associate with civilization. But here is where the twist gets stranger. Gilligan noticed something in the archaeological record that did not fit a simple story of gradual improvement. Clothing use appears to have come and gone. It spiked during cold periods and faded during warm ones, appearing and disappearing in the tool record, almost like a technology that got forgotten and reinvented, again and again, as the climate shifted beneath your ancestors' feet. That tells you something important. Clothing was not evidence of some steady march of progress. It was a direct reactive response to crisis. When the world got cold enough to threaten survival, clothing appeared. When it warmed again, in some populations, it faded from the archaeological trace almost entirely. So what did the first clothes actually look like? Nothing like fabric. Early clothing was almost certainly simple draped hides, animal skins scraped clean and wrapped or tied around the body. The tools that made this possible were not looms or needles at first. They were scrapers. Simple stone flakes used to clean fat and flesh from hides so they would not rot, so they could be worn without becoming a health hazard against the skin. Then, sometime later, something changed the game entirely. The needle. Bone needles with tiny drilled eyes start appearing in the archaeological record roughly 45,000 years ago, and their appearance coincides almost exactly with humans pushing into brutally cold environments, including Siberia and eventually the Arctic. A draped hide can keep you somewhat warm. A sewn fitted garment, one that traps a layer of warm air against your skin and seals out wind, is a completely different level of protection. The needle did not just make clothes better, it made entire regions of the planet survivable for the first time. Consider what that actually enabled. Without sewn, insulated clothing, humans could not have crossed into the extreme cold of northern Siberia, and without that migration, humans would likely never have crossed the land bridge into the Americas at all. A tiny sliver of carved bone, invented to solve a local problem of staying warm, ended up reshaping the entire map of where your species could exist on Earth. Isn't it strange that an entire hemisphere's population history hinges on something as small as a needle? Now here is the part that connects all of this back to you, sitting wherever you are right now. Once clothing became reliable, something happened to your body that nobody was planning for. Humans stopped needing to evolve thick fur or heavy natural insulation because clothing was doing that job instead. Your species essentially outsourced part of its own evolution to technology. You are quite literally walking around today in a body that stopped adapting to cold the moment your ancestors figured out how to fake that adaptation with animal hide and eventually woven cloth. That is not a metaphor. That is a documented biological trade-off. Populations living in cold climates today still show physical adaptations, like slightly stockier builds that retain heat more efficiently. But you do not see nearly the level of extreme cold adaptation you would expect from tens of thousands of years living in freezing environments, because clothing absorbed most of that evolutionary pressure before your body ever had to. Clothing, in other words, changed what evolution demanded of you, and it did something else too. Once early humans had hides and eventually textiles, decoration followed almost immediately. Beads sewn onto garments, pigments used to color hides. Clothing rapidly stopped being purely functional and became a canvas for identity, for status, for signaling who belonged to which group. The same object that kept your ancestors alive during an ice age became, almost simultaneously, one of the first ways humans expressed who they were to each other. You still do this every single day without thinking about it. The clothes you choose this morning are rarely just about temperature. They are about signaling, profession, belonging, personality, mood. That impulse did not arrive with fashion magazines or social media. It arrived somewhere in an ice age, wrapped around a hide scraper and a bone needle. So when you open your closet this morning, you are participating in something far older and stranger than a simple wardrobe choice. You are continuing a habit your ancestors built out of desperation, refined out of necessity, and then almost immediately turned into a form of expression. The shirt on your back is not just fabric. It is the end of a very long chain that starts with a nearly hairless, heat-adapted animal getting caught by an ice age it was never built to survive, and inventing its way out of extinction with hides, scrapers, and a single small needle. You are standing in front of your closet right now, in your head, deciding what to wear today. But the real answer to why you even can make that choice at all is far stranger than fabric. It goes back to an animal that lost its fur to survive the heat, only to find itself facing the cold, and instead of waiting for evolution to catch up, simply built the fur it needed, one scraped hide and one bone needle at a time.